And these are topics and conversations that help you get moving with your job search. And if you need additional help there, we have other programs as well. We're currently in our spring accountability program, and this is a 6-week program that goes everywhere from some discernment all the way out to negotiation and interview prep. We are prepping for a summer cohort. If that is something that's appealing to you, sign up now. We're getting bigger and bigger cohorts, so we're really happy to work with everyone. We also want to make sure we can accommodate you. We have some on-demand workshops on LinkedIn and personal brand. And of course, our book and e-course Back to Business are available now. So if you've got some getting back into the workforce questions or switching roles or careers, we're here for you. So you check those out on our website. But today, we're going to talk with Mary Alex, who is a LinkedIn consultant and a program manager with Upskilling North Dakota. And she's going to be talking about leveling up your LinkedIn. And she's really going to talk a little bit more about ageism and career gaps. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mary, and then we're going to have a conversation. So Mary Alex's past roles helped her help organizations make change around their digital transformation using cloud technology and LinkedIn interventions. And in fact, for the last 5 years, she's worked on the LinkedIn business, where she worked with individuals, enterprises, and nonprofits, where to help them recognize the cost benefits, scalability, and flexibility that migrating to the cloud provides. Prior to that, she worked in a different industry and in a very different capacity, leading nonprofits and foundations, where she built internal capabilities of charities through smart business practices and, of course, LinkedIn strategies. So Mary Alex has both switched roles and careers, and now she is working as a LinkedIn consultant and ready to talk about this. She's got some super interesting personal interests as well. I understand you've done some open water swimming to Alcatraz. So we're delighted to have you here at the Swing Shift. So I'm going to stop my slides and join the conversation. So Mary Alex, you have a ton of experience working as a LinkedIn consultant. What are the most critical aspects to a strong LinkedIn profile, particularly if you've just left employment?
Yeah, that's a great launch question. Thanks. And thanks for having me today, Nancy and Sarah. So I always like to quote Jeff Weiner. He was the CEO of LinkedIn when Microsoft bought LinkedIn back in 2016. And by the way, for the astronomical amount of 26.2 billion.
Wow.
It remains the largest purchase that Microsoft has ever made. So you can imagine that over the last 5 years that Microsoft has owned LinkedIn, it is much more data and AI driven. It's more sophisticated than it used to be. It's far more now than just a jobs board.
Right.
But when we bought it, Jeff Weiner was still the CEO, and when we purchased it, and what he is quoted as saying, I always like to quote, so bear with me here. He said, "We want everyone to have their dream job, and LinkedIn is the key to unlock that. LinkedIn transforms the trajectory of your career." And really, I want you to pay attention to the next sentence, because it encapsulates the answer to your question, Nancy. It's the most important attribute about a great LinkedIn profile is authenticity, right? LinkedIn is not just a cut and paste of your resume, which is what people just tend to think it is. LinkedIn is much more about interpersonally who I am. It's far more values laden than a resume could ever be.
Yes.
Right? And we know like the power of LinkedIn just keeps expanding.
Right.
Just to quote some statistics, 772 million users, available now in 24 languages, and 2 new users every second.
Which is amazing in terms of
Yeah,
breadth and scope.
Yes, it is just, I'm always amazed, and I'm always trying to convince my clients, and LinkedIn actually is still one of my clients, is that, it's the number one tool that people should be using from a social media perspective, right? At least when you make an investment in LinkedIn, it definitely has the opportunity to pay off in your career.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I had a question about this because one of the things you talked about was authenticity, and people talk about that a lot. Now, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and I think you do a very interesting job of saying these are the things that we talk about, because this totally is 100% resonant with how we talk about the relationship between your resume and LinkedIn at the Swing Shift. Your profile, I noticed something that you do is you say, this was the dream job for me and here's why, and then you went into the quantifications. Is that what you mean in terms of manifesting authenticity?
Authenticity is really, it's your why statement, right? It's about what drives me from a values laden perspective. What we also know, Nancy and Sarah, is that today companies hire far more than in the baby boom generation. They are hiring today for fit, right?
Right.
You need to interpersonally fit a company now to get hired. That's why they're doing personality tests. That's why they do all kinds of different, video calls with you, etc. They need to get a sense of what impassions you. And so when you write that about statement, which by the way, we know at LinkedIn is the one of the most read areas of the profile. However, one of the hardest for people to
Right.
write, right? That and a lot of my clients, that's where I get a lot of work, is helping them with that about section, because you need to project that authenticity of who you are. You need to expand on what drives you from a values laden perspective.
Right.
So when you looked at my profile, Nancy, you saw that my first sentence, I think, is LinkedIn wants to change the world, and so do I. Bang. Like,
Right.
that's who I am. That's what impassions me. You can feel my passion even through this video
Right.
call. And that is what you need to have you move, to project in that about section.
Right.
So I think, and again, that's why it's very hard for people. They think it's just like a statement, a bragful statement of who they are. And it's not. It's what draws us interpersonally. The other thing I'll just point out real quick is the about section should of course be about your self branding, but that about section should end with something again about personally who you are.
Right.
And that's why, Nancy, in my about section, and I encourage people on here to go in and connect with me, etc. Happy to connect. Is that last few sentences about what differentiates Mary Alex from the thousands of other applicants you'll get for a job. And so that I've swum the English Channel or Alcatraz or whatever it is that I do that I'm impassioned about.
Right.
It also, Nancy, it not only differentiates me, but from an ageism perspective, it makes you sound relevant. It makes you sound active and engaging
Right.
outside of the workplace. So again, at the end of the day, what I tell my clients is it's not a cut and paste of your resume. And if
Sure.
that's what you've done, you've just thrown it up against the wall and hope that it sticks. It's much more about who I am, internally.
Right. So, and that, a lot of people will do that as a first step.
Sure.
I wanna ask you a little more. You've said, as we've talked before, about your sweet spot being really LinkedIn 2.0 and LinkedIn 3.0. Can you explain a little more about that? Because I think for a lot of people, they know they have to have a LinkedIn profile, and so they start legitimately by putting, a copy of their resume on LinkedIn. Maybe they write a little something in the about section, but talk a little bit about how you level that up.
Yeah. So sometimes the best way to answer a question is an example. I will tell you that like you mentioned earlier, I was in the philanthropies business for 20 years.
Right.
And I honestly needed a change. I think we all know when we sort of get fatigued by a sector and we really want to make a next, big leap, be it 2.0, 3.0. And I've even worked with baby boomers who are 4.0 in their careers.
Yeah.
So what I had to do, Nancy, was go back and for 20 years of a career, respin my LinkedIn profile. If I wanted to go from the nonprofit sector that talked about capacity building or fundraising and those sorts of terms that are sector specific to the nonprofit world, I had to reinvent myself and change my whole profile to talk about revenue goals, to talk about marketing skill sets, data and AI, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And every time you want to leap to a new sector in your career, don't underestimate what that's going to take to reinvent yourself on LinkedIn. You need to go back and you need to figure out what is the jargon specific words that I need to use if I am going to leap into another sector.
Right.
So I went from working for the Dave Matthews Band Foundation, to Microsoft, the second largest company in the world, give or take whatever day it is. And so it took me a lot of reinventing myself. It took me, recrafting my whole profile. It took me being laser focused on what does Microsoft look for? If Microsoft was my ultimate goal, and I thank the Lord that I was able to do that, what words do I need to infuse in my profile that will resonate with the values of Satya Nadella as the CEO,
Right.
and everything flows down? What words do I need to use?
And so for some people, that's a really good piece of guidance, right? So others are maybe not, they have a broader search, right? And so for folks that are maybe not saying, oh, I really want to work at, Microsoft or Expedia or Redfin, for those people who are saying, I would like to get a job like as a marketing manager, maybe it's more of a broader brush. How I love the idea of you saying, make sure that you're relevant and that you're attuned to what's going on in a given industry or a given company. What kind of guidance do you give to folks who are looking at a little bit of a broader level?
Yeah, I mean, what I encourage clients to do, and whenever I teach, the people who are most profoundly using LinkedIn for their next gig or leap know generally, like you said, the positions they want. And what that person needs to do is they need to cull those marketing jobs that are out there, pull out, the specific terminology and sprinkle that in their profile so that at least they'll make the first round of interviewing. Right. And people, the clients that I work with that have the most success actually know the 3 companies they want to work for. They know within those 3 companies, what is the terminology and the values laden specifics that they need to use to mimic in their profiles.
Right. And I think that's good guidance, even if, you think, well, I'm not quite sure which organization I want to go to. I think that that's good guidance to say, pick 3 as models, because maybe you don't end up there. Maybe you've targeted a company like, I'll take Redfin. I have a friend who just went to work over there, but realtor.com comes calling. You can use that as a comparative data point.
That's right.
It's also a good reminder that your LinkedIn profile is always evolving as your focus gets more targeted as well. So I think something that we talk with our community about is, they think, okay, I'm going to put all this work in and then I'm all done with it.
Right.
And that's not the case at all. Right. But it's also great for those people that are perfectionists, right? Like telling them it's never going to be perfect, it's never going to be done, can sometimes take that weight off of a little bit. And they can just use it and update it as they, again, as they learn more about where they want to be next. And what you're saying, Mary Alex, the ultimate goal sounds like really as focused as you can get will make the most success, at least from what you've found with your clients. Yeah.
Bingo. Yep.
Yep. Yep. You touched on this earlier, and I want to talk a little more about it. You have talked about career gaps, and particularly about ageism as you work. You've encountered this, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little more about how to address this, and what are the barriers, and how do you knock those barriers down?
Yeah, I think, well, number one, I will say that I think it was like, maybe you ladies know, maybe 2 weeks ago, LinkedIn came out, with a way,
Yes.
to sort of spin, if you will, gaps in your career. And, as you ladies know, and my having read your book, 49%, right, of women,
45. Yeah.
45, yeah, percent of women will have gaps in their career. So what do we know right there? That normalizes it to a certain extent, right? That
Mhm.
at least we can, if we know that generally half of women will have gaps, it's not as abnormal, I think, as people that are in this situation feel. And it's not always women, right? Now
Right.
there's men staying home and men caring for their parents. So we don't want to make it all about women. But what I think is important about gaps is within that time, I mean, the general rules of thumb, not telling anything too new here, is to try to, even in some way, keep your foot in the game, even if it was just to do a wee bit of consulting,
Right.
right? And or what sort of volunteerism are you able to secure? Or did you start a women's group that went viral, that provided resources? Like, I think there are ways to craft that time, into a productive thing. And I think also, again, going back to that about section, this is where you could say, yes, I did have a career gap because family values are important to me, and the
Yes.
future of my children is cardinal to their success in life, or something. There's a way, again, in LinkedIn where you can spin things that are about who you are
Right.
interpersonally.
Right. I think that's new. I mean, when Sarah and I started the business 4 years ago, the general guidance was don't talk about your family, right?
Mm,
Don't talk about your kids. And particularly in the current environment where we're in the middle of, and hopefully coming out of, a pandemic, everybody sees your family all the time. And,
Literally on
and
virtual calls now.
literally, we both had surprise guests in our programming. Um, so I think that we're at a very unique time where there is better understanding of that. Um, I don't know if you have an opinion on this. How, as things go back and people start going back into the office, do you think that will switch back?
I really don't. Why do I think that?
Yeah.
Because, for instance, let's take a look at the, issue that was maybe 2 weeks ago, a big thing that hit the media in large, which was about, um, the changing. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but the changing politics of Georgia and Texas,
Right.
and around voting rights. And what do we know right away? CEO of Levi Strauss, Satya Nadella, Microsoft, even Bezos, who doesn't come out often and speak politically, all came out about that issue. So I do believe more and more that LinkedIn and the whole working world has transformed. And again, values, corporations now come out with their values. Like
Hmm.
CEOs do talk about their families on their LinkedIn profiles. Check out some of the biggest CEOs, and many
Right.
of them will mention their families on their LinkedIn profile. I think that was pre-COVID, and I think it's going to be post-COVID.
We sure hope so, because as you well know, there is age bias and there's family bias. When, if you're
Yes.
taking a break or you're looking to switch, I mean, it is better. I found it very encouraging that LinkedIn put a stay-at-home parent as an elective title. The reality is that there's still a lot of questions with recruiting and hiring managers, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the age bias element, because I think we hear it on the Gap. Could you talk a little bit about the ageism? How do you address that? Is it just really making sure you're relevant and you have the right talking points, or is it more?
Are you asking like during an interview or on your
Oh no,
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn. In LinkedIn. I mean, the general perception is don't put your graduation year, knock off those first couple of jobs so that maybe you
Yeah,
look 5 to 10 years younger than you already are. What
yeah,
beyond that? I mean, do you ascribe to that? Number one, and number two, what beyond that? What would you
yeah.
suggest?
I'll go back to authenticity.
Hmm.
To put a dated profile picture is not okay.
Right.
Your profile picture needs to be within the last couple years. Why do we know that? Because eventually the hiring manager is going to see you.
Right.
Eventually you're going to do a video call, and it's inauthentic and a soft fibbing, if you will, to have a profile picture that's dated.
Right.
It doesn't present well. It projects inauthenticity right off the bat. However, let's not underestimate staying relevant and through your profile, meaning, again, it goes back to my talking about what you do that projects vitality. Don't create a profile that isn't contemporary, meaning use buzzwords today that are very prevalent. Make your profile look as youthful as you can. And I think when you go into a lot of baby boomers profiles, they look dated. They don't talk about passion. They don't talk about I'm coachable. Always talk about that you're a
Mm.
lifelong learner, that you're coachable. Like, use terms that today are more prevalent than they were 20 years ago.
Right.
So I'm saying make your profile as youthful and vital as possible. Talk about what you do outside of work, right?
Right.
That keeps you relevant, swimming, cycling, whatever.
Right.
And be authentic and be mindful of how you say things, because just go in and read a lot, read the Wall Street Journal, read
Right.
Harvard Business Review, look at the terminology that they're using, and you need to stay current. And that's, again, where I think people fall short as they age in their career.
Right.
From what I've read, and you two are really the gurus, so correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is ageism for women starts at 35, but only 5 more years later, it starts for men.
That's right.
And so we're all facing it. We're
Right.
all, this is a fact of life, and careers have ups and downs. And no matter what, you're going to grow old in your career. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that you need to have a non-contemporary profile.
Right, right. Well, and I just read a super interesting data point that 1 in 20 people on LinkedIn are recruiters of some form or other. Is that true?
I know we say it's 78 to 95 of recruiters are on LinkedIn. It's still by far the greatest tool, the most
Yeah.
profound tool that hiring managers use. They do a lot of intel gathering where you can't go in and see them, as we
Mhm.
all know. But by far, leaps and bounds, LinkedIn is still the number one. And we
Oh,
also, just had our earnings release last week. And LinkedIn, as far as ad revenue, beat out Pinterest. So we know it's only going up when it comes to sales generation.
right, right. So, and I think the thing that I found as someone as a consumer of LinkedIn, I thought that data point was fascinating. 5% of the people that are on there are recruiting in some way, shape, or form, which just really lends to even more credence about why it's important here. Um, what are some calls to action that you would give to someone who maybe has a basic LinkedIn profile and wants to level up? So, what's your CTAs?
So, the call to action, I think, is a couple of them. Number one, have a picture that, selfies are not the best picture, and you see that a lot. Your picture What do we know interpersonally? Interpersonally, we know we're drawn to pictures. We zero in on pictures. So, when people don't have, if you said to me, Mary Alex, what are some compliments you get? I would say, well, eyes and cheeks. So what do I know? I would know that I want my LinkedIn profile picture to exemplify the best features of my face, right?
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, in conjunction with that, the banner picture behind people, one of the cardinal telltale signs that they're not a LinkedIn sophisticated user is when they have the template background banner. You need to have that populated behind your profile picture. And what do we know, Nancy? We know that the profile picture needs to pop out
Right.
from the banner picture behind you. So a call to action is to make sure that yours pop. Second call to action is to go into your profile. On the 3 illuminated gray dots, you can do a PDF printout of your profile. I encourage you to go in and do that and look at how it presents, because people can get that on you, right? Every time you go to apply for a job, that's how they're going to send your LinkedIn profile to somebody else within the company. So make sure that it looks good on a PDF.
Oh, that's great guidance.
Pardon me?
That's great guidance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Third call to action, even more important than what I just told you, is this. What do we know? We know that millennials and Gen Zs are profoundly just using this device. Right? They're not doing a device. They're not on their laptop devices like other generations are. So what do I tell you next? I tell you, go into the LinkedIn app and look at how your profile looks on the app. Because again, that's how most users are looking at it. And people don't think about that.
Right.
So I encourage you to go in and look at cross-platform is what I'm saying. I encourage you to go in and look at your profile on cross-platform, and you'll be surprised.
And what are they looking for when they see that? Like, what are some things that make it look odd on a mobile phone versus a desktop, I guess? Like, is it just really how it flows, how the text,
how it flows,
right,
how it's the choppiness of it, the spacing of it can be off. Your profile, honestly, I've been on laptops and the profile banner and picture look one way, and you get on this device, it's not nearly as pop. I think it depends on the profile, sort of how to answer that question, but it's usually the look and feel.
Got it.
It's off.
That makes sense.
So if you're creating it, if you're thinking I want to create more of my profile on the app, then I would do the look and feel on the app. However, that's not generally how HR people, though, are going in and looking at it, right? They're usually looking on a device, on a laptop.
Right. That, and I think all three of those things, look at your visuals, right? Look at your PDF, which I knew that you could do a PDF. I didn't know that that was something that would be downloadable within an organization. That's great insight. And then check your multiple devices, because you're right. Some people use an iPad or a tablet. Some are using laptops. Some are using mobile. And I think those are three really great calls to action. We have taken up a ton of your time, Mary. What have you, is there something else you want to share with us that we haven't talked about here?
I also have a couple of questions.
Oh, you do have a couple? Oh, well, before we do that then.
So, Mary Alex, I know you're not a recruiter, but just from working with your clients, there's a lot of back and forth on that little, open to work logo that can be viewed on your profile picture. What are your thoughts around that? Is that something that you advise your clients to do? Do you kind of say, no, stay away from that, focus on the other elements of your profile to stand out? I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I think that is a really great question. And I don't mean to be wishy-washy, but I could make the case both ways for that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
On it, making the case, the plus for doing that would be that it's glaringly obvious. What do we know about LinkedIn? We know that the average profile gets 8 to 10 seconds of viewing. With that said, you need to grab them and hold them in. And if I'm a recruiter and I see that around the profile picture, I know, bang, that person's looking for work. However, the case could also be made, of course, if you're in a job, you want to be super careful, doing that internally, right? And it depends, on your place of work, whether how obvious you can make it be that you're looking for other work. But I think, again, Sarah, likes most social media, it depends on what your ambition is. Because you want to hold people on your profile, you never want to keep them guessing. And that's like a cardinal rule. Make it obvious. LinkedIn is like writing for radio journalism. Short, quick, hold them, concise, get them, have them be gone. The other thing I would say I'm sorry, I was going to go back to one last thing I wanted to bring to bear, but if you have another question, Sarah.
No, go ahead. You go. I'll sum it up at the end, but yeah, I want to hear what you have to say on the other topic.
Sure. One thing I always like to tell clients is, at the end of the day, emotions always win. Right? It's always interpersonally who we like, who we don't like, who we resonate with. Are they a swimmer? Are they a cat lover? Blah, blah, blah. Right? It's about human relationships. And for me, what makes me so profoundly excited and why I love LinkedIn is that it's so much greater than your resume, which if you, Sarah, Nancy, and I threw our resumes down on a table, they would all generally look the same.
Right.
But if you went back into positions I had at Microsoft and you looked at the way I spun it versus a colleague of mine spun it versus a colleague of theirs spun it, it would all look different on LinkedIn. Because again, we accentuate different things on our LinkedIn. Again, we, from a values projection, want to focus on different things. And that's why I love LinkedIn. It's the authenticity of showing who I am interpersonally.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this has been wonderful. I just wanted to kind of sum up some of the main points that we talked about, really being authentic, making sure that your personality is shining through. And how you do that is really the first part is that about statement. Obviously the pictures are important, the about statement, having that, value statement up front, with Mary Alex, you talked about 8 to 10 seconds. That value statement is what will make people want to click the read more button, right? To populate that about me section. So it's really got to grab the reader, you need to make them want to learn more about you, essentially.
Curious.
Yep. Making sure that it's targeted, and then finally making sure that it's relevant. And you mentioned reading up on what's happening in your industry. What language are they using right now? Another thing we talk about is looking at other people's profiles that are within your industry, making sure that they're good though, right? Because a lot of them aren't. Even the most successful people can have the worst LinkedIn profiles. So really making sure that, they're resonating with you and that they look if they look good to you, that's a, you can definitely, borrow some of that language that they have and that they're using and emulate that, but again, making sure that it's authentic to you. So those are kind of the main points that I took away from this. I don't know, Nancy, if I missed anything.
No, I think that's right on the money. And I love the really actionable guidance, Mary Alex, that you provide, because I think a lot of people.
Can I provide one more?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get impassioned. I always tell clients that you need to send your profile to 5 people you trust to do feasibility. Meaning, am I projecting what I think I'm wanting to project? Right? Feasibility, feasibility, feasibility. Like, we write things and we get myopic to that, and we misspell things, or we misquote, or we miss something. But when you do feasibility with your LinkedIn profile, believe me, people will find things that are off about it.
Yeah.
So I really encourage people to send your profile to 5 people that you trust who
Right.
have good judgment, and see what they say about your profile.
Yeah, we like to encourage people to do that as well and say, you know, what are the top, you know, 3 traits you get from this profile when you're reading it? What are the feelings you get? You know, what type of, how am I coming across?
Yeah.
You know, all of that, just seeing what those knee gut initial reactions are a really great starting point for sure.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I've often taught a class where we literally put up, people are bold enough to put up their profiles, and I will give my impression and tips and tricks and what I would do. And then other people taking the class do that as well. And they'll say, well, what do you mean by this term here? And did you mean to say that? And blah, blah. Like, again, feasibility is key to a great profile.
So Mary Alex, on that point, you teach some courses. They're open to the general public, or no? Is there a place that people can come check out, like a website or your LinkedIn perhaps?
I use LinkedIn as my #1 social media tool. And I, encourage people to connect with me there. I've just done a series of podcasts like this, et cetera, that I can share with people. And, I'm still consulting for Microsoft and LinkedIn, but do other side consulting with people individually, authors I work with a lot. And I also offer a service where for 2 hours, we just bring up your profile, go through it, tips and tricks. What would I do? How would I craft your about section, et cetera. So it's just like one-on-one, 2 hours of intense consulting. But that's, a lot of what I'm passionate to do, and I think brings great value to my clients.
Great. And so the best way for people to reach you is on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mary, Alex. Thank you so much for joining us here with Hangout Habits.